Thank you, Lachey Roach, for this question. She said, we might have already answered this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What are the benefits of a trust and how to transfer my current home and rental property into a trust? So we've already talked about the benefits of a trust. And as far as transferring her current home and rental property into a trust, essentially she didn't set up an appointment. She needed to come to you. You're going to help.
That's
it's
right.
not something that she can do.
But again, current home, we can transfer it directly. Start having these conversations about, hey, these are the assets that I sort of have and you may want to have or keep, and let's start talking about that process and what it looks like.
I love that. I'm glad you brought that up. So what does it look like for someone to work with you? And then we will get into like what it looked like when we work together. But if somebody says, I think I need a will, I need a trust, what do they do?
Great. So a great question. And they normally call in. One of the first things that we do is we send them out a questionnaire to complete. Fortunately, the questionnaire is online now, and that's part of our transition from the PDF to a fillable PDF. Now we go online, and it's been beneficial because now I don't get names misspelled. So if I were the client, I could see TUA, TWA being spelled, but since I'm inputting the information the correct way, it gets done. So we send out an online questionnaire. We have an initial meeting with the client, and that's the initial meeting. The initial consultation is completely free. Only requirements are that they must have that questionnaire completed at least a day before, or if they're coming for an in-person meeting, they must bring canned goods as part of our local drive for our local food bank. But if it's a virtual meeting, because we do a lot of virtual, with the advent of COVID, it's taught us that now Zoom and these virtual spaces are as accommodating for clients, because I have clients. My main office is in Conyers, but I manage the 29 offices for our firm in terms of estate planning. So I have clients in Canton, Blue Ridge, you name it. And so most of the time they will do a lot of our meetings virtually. And the one meeting that's required in person is the signing meeting. So initial consultation in person or virtual. After the initial consultation, and really what we do at that meeting is to gather information. So I'm listening, and I have received your questionnaire, I'm listening, and we're starting to develop some of the plan in place. The next meeting is called the design meeting. That's when prior to that meeting, I will send them a form that has on the left-hand side their current plan. So if they were to pass away before we complete everything, it gives them an outline of how things would happen in terms of their asset. And then on the right-hand side would be the recommended plan based on our conversations. Who's going to serve in this capacity? How are things going to be distributed? It gives them sort of a visual of how their plan would be. In addition, we send them, prior to that design meeting, we send them the engagement letter that says, this is the agreement for you to sign, but here's what the cost of that is. Because prior to, we don't know exactly the cost that is going to be associated with the plan. We give people starting points. This is typically what our will-based plans start at. This is typically what our trust-based plan start out. But we won't know until I've had a chance to review your questionnaire and, more importantly, review the minutes or my notes from your initial meeting, your initial consultation, before I can tell you, okay, based on everything we've talked about, this is what I need to do to provide you with a plan. So they'll get that recommended plan, they'll get the invoice at the design meeting, and we'll talk about it to sort of fine tune it. The next meeting after that is the signing meeting. That's when we'll execute all the documents. Now, for clients that are will-based plans, that's their final meeting. They get their binder, as you mentioned, that you had, and they'll receive the binder there. For our trust-based plans, that's actually not the last meeting, because as I mentioned before, it's important that a trust is funded. Now, this is what differentiates my office from other estate planning attorneys. Most estate planning attorneys, that will be your final meeting. So they'll give you the documents, and they'll say, okay, well, here's how you should redirect all your assets into this wonderful trust that we gave you. And you and I both know that it's very difficult at that point for clients to go through that funding process. And so we assist in that process. So our final meeting with our trust-based clients is a funding meeting where we'll sit down and go asset by asset and say, okay, this is how we transfer them into the trust. Now, the clients still have to work with their institutions to get us the necessary forms the necessary account information, but we'll fill out the forms and provide it to them at that funding meeting so that we can, draft deeds, draft beneficiary forms, and that's it. And so at the end of the day, they'll get the physical copy of their binder. They'll also get a digital copy of the binder that we'll store for them to have access 24/7. Because that questionnaire that I mentioned earlier also serves as a portal. And so they can go in and look at those documents. So if they get requests in the future, hey, I need a copy of your trust, it's easy for them to be able to access it that way. So again, in a nutshell, that's our general process for getting a plan. It's customized to the clients. And so that's why we take the time to make sure that we're doing the plan that's appropriate for them.
Okay. So as far as time frame goes, and I'm going to ask you about the time frame, but I also know it's dependent on the person getting the information.
Absolutely. Getting it back. I get clients that ask that all the time, and they want absolutely, and we can go, we can do a plan almost, I would say, meeting at least the quickest plans. We meet once a week. So will-based plans we can get done in 3 weeks. Trust-based plans, ideally, we can get done in 4 weeks. But we know that there's assignments and homework. As I mentioned, those memorial instructions. So after the first meeting, we send you an email saying, hey, we talked about it, but we send you an email saying, hey, fill out this memorial instructions. Also, again, as I mentioned, getting the forms from their institutions, like the life insurance, the homeowners insurance, the brokerage, getting the forms sometimes takes a while. So really it's dependent on our clients in terms of getting the process together. So we can be as quick as you want us to be, but typically it's about one meeting a week.
Okay. Yeah. And listen, I'm not going to tell you that it's easy. Oh, just contact them and then it's going to be done. No, there's work that you need to do on your end, but it was so necessary and helpful, especially having the portal there and being able to pull, okay, here's all our retirement. Here's it was just, it's stuff that we need to do anyway, but we're not doing it. We don't keep up with it. And then at that time, when it's not done, then the family's scrambling to figure out, well, what accounts did mom and dad have and what such and such. So it gives you a peace of mind to know, okay, yeah, it's going to take work on the front end, but anything worth having is going to take some work. So go through and do it. And then you also did work with me. So if I didn't have it, I'd be like, hi, I'm still working on such and such. And then we would, coordinate. And then you also worked with my husband's schedule because his schedule is different than mine. So we were able to coordinate that way. You mentioned about the funding. I appreciate you sharing that. Like not all attorneys do the funding because you help, like I had an investment property and you had that transferred into the LLC.
That's right.
LLC is the owner.
You brought that. Yeah. And
yeah.
The way people look at a trust and is that the trust is sort of a holding company. It's there to transfer the assets upon disability and death. So how do you get assets into the trust? Well, it depends on the type of asset. Primary residence, we can fund directly into the trust. Other real property, like investment properties, yes, you can put it directly into the trust, but we try to get people to understand that there are liability issues surrounding rental properties, investment properties. So the best structure is to place that investment property in an LLC, a business entity, and then transfer the shares of that company to the trust. So indirectly, that's how you get the investment property into the trust, but by going through an LLC or an entity into the trust. So really, it kind of, at the end of the day, everything is put into the trust. It just depends on which asset it is and how you get it there. But again, going back to why we use professionals, why we use people who are experienced, is because some people may not know these differentiating factors or to think about it this way. Some people may say, hey, we can go straight into the trust. And the other thing to mention about people in a trust, the trust has a revocable living trust, which is the standard form of a trust, has no liability protection. And so that's why you won't want to put things like your investment properties directly into the trust. You want to put it into an LLC that will have sorts of protection in there, so that in case something occurs with the property, slip and fall, lawsuits, whatever, it shields your overall estate from liability because it's now in that company's name.
expertise. Like I could not even imagine like how much Googling I would have to, like, even if so, like, would I trust it if I did find it? And like, no, I don't have time for that. I go to the professional. You are truly the professional. So anyone looking for a will, a trust, even if you're selling a home, your closing attorney, put to his name on your contract, like he is the go-to. Well, I did not know that you oversaw the estate planning for like all the Luder, Lock, and Hunter offices.
Well, that's why I used to have hair until I started doing that, and just miraculously. But no, it's a great process. We're still in the early stages of getting it all together, but I'm enjoying it. Again, you meet people on good terms. I love meeting various types of people, and I think that's always, my selfish side of me is always trying to figure out, well, what am I doing when I finally grow up? And it's wonderful to be able to meet people at different stages, different walks of life, and just gather that little bit of tidbit or knowledge that they may have and try to apply it in your sort of everyday. But I think it's important that at the very minimum, estate planning provides you with organization, because we all know what our assets are. There's no questions there. The question is, if you become disabled or if you pass away, how well organized are you that your assets would be accounted for or taken care of? And it forces you, estate planning, because of the binder, for the most part, it forces you to get those things together, organized, so that there's one central area to be able to handle it. And that's what I tell people, even my will-based plans, where you have all these non-probatable assets that don't necessarily get funded into the will, because that's not really what a will is. But you still want to go through the process of making sure that your life insurance at your brokerage or whatever accounts that you have are properly reflected. And you can still put them in the binder, even though the will is not controlling that asset. You still put it in the binder for peace of mind. When you die, one area that your executor can go to and be able to understand all the assets that you have.
I so appreciate that. I have two more things. One, you mentioned power of attorney. So I get the power of attorney when it comes to wills and trusts, but on the real estate closing side, right, there are some people that cannot attend closing, or, I've had it to where a buyer assigned power of attorney to his cousin to be able to sign at closing. And that's just limited, right? They're just signing for that day.
Great point. I was going to bring that up. So the estate planning power of attorney is a broad power of attorney. It's there to handle all aspects. In fact, again, it is a document that's that's been encoded or added to the law. So it's a statutory power of attorney. The statutory form is about 8 pages long. My firm has created about a 33-page long document, because we add additional powers, what we call enhanced powers. Everything from being able to manage property, businesses, fund your trust, amend, social media, taxes, bills, accounts, everything that we take for granted that we're able to do, we want to have our power of attorney do it. So in our estate planning power of attorney, there are two general types of power of attorney. There's what's called executory, and there's what's called springing. The executory power of attorney means as soon as you sign it, that person automatically has the right to sign on your behalf. For my estate planning, I prefer to put most of my 99.9% of my powers of attorney, my general powers of attorney, are springing. That means an event has to occur before. Because we've added all these enhanced powers, again, we know that your loved one, the person that you've identified, is going to be competent. There's no fraud or no issues there. But we're attorneys. We always think of worst case scenario. So if I'm going to give all of those enhanced powers, I'm going to put a little obstacle. I'm going to make it springing, meaning one of two things must happen. Either A, you're still fine and competent, so you sign a document saying that they can handle it for you, or B, you're no longer competent, so two physicians, your primary physician and another physician, have to sign off saying that this person now can handle your affairs. So that's a spring that we do for the majority of our clients, other than your spouse, which we say your spouse typically there's no issues, so you can give them that. But for everybody else acting, there needs to be a springing aspect to the power of attorney. Now, on the real estate side, the powers of attorney are specific. They are specific to that particular transaction. So we put in details. If you're a buyer, it has to be approved by your lender. And so your lender says, well, we have to have loan amount, we have to have interest rate, we have to have specificity on that document to apply to this transaction. If you're a seller on a real estate transaction, you don't need all the loan. But again, we still have to register the legal description, say it's for this property, and limit what they are authorized to be able to do. So those are the powers of attorney. Now, if you're not going to be able to be at a closing, we also offer the option of a mail-away, where we have a notary or an attorney go to your house and actually have you sign there. So we typically offer those two, the specific power of attorney or the mail-away option to our clients on the real estate side, to be able to make it convenient for them to execute that.
Okay, I just thought about this one. Do you ever see closings going, signing virtually?
Not virtually. No. Now, during COVID, the governor passed a law that allowed us to be able to do some transactions via Zoom. It was good. As somebody who's been practicing for a while, you'll find it was different. And so I'm not necessarily saying I'm comfortable in doing it long term, but it was unique. And because of the circumstances, it ended up being fine. Now we typically don't do virtual signings at all. In rare circumstances where there's a cash deal and it's a buyer, we can send documents to them and they can sign and return them back to us, because we're not as concerned with fraud and identity on the buyer side. If you want to sign as Thua Barlay for a property, be my guest. But when you're selling it, then it's going to be more issues. So we're more strict on the seller side of those transactions. Okay,
because I just always hear like, oh, all this paper. Why do they sell all this paper? But I guess they want that blue ink, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I'm bad at paper too, because not only do I use legal size paper in my real estate practice, but I used to give full size copies of the package to the buyer, and we scaled back. So now we only give a few documents, because you ask anybody a year, 2, 3 years after your closing, give me the closing package, and it's thrown away somewhere. So we give the most important documents to the buyers, and then we email you a digital copy now to sort of save trees and be more mindful of that.
Okay. All right. Question that I got. Thank you, Lachey Roach, for this question. She said, we might have already answered this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What are the benefits of a trust, and how to transfer my current home and rental property into a trust? So we've already talked about the benefits of a trust. And as far as transferring her current home and rental property into a trust, essentially she didn't set up an appointment. She needed to come to you.
That's right. It's not something that she could do. But again, current home, we can transfer it directly into a trust. Rental property, typically, we recommend putting it into an LLC, and then we transfer the shares of that LLC to the trust. But again, as we mentioned, benefits, really, it's that probate process. Again, in a simple estate, it may not be an issue, but we know family dynamics, it's a lot easier to get things taken care of and done under a trust than it is a will. So we have those conversations, and our trust-based plans cost a whole lot more than our will-based plans. So you would think I would try to put everybody in a trust, but no, you go through the factors that I mentioned earlier to make sure that it's appropriate for the client. But for the most part, if it's borderline, I will recommend to the client the trust. At the end of the day, it's up to the client to make the final determination. But if you have properties, if you have businesses, if you have properties in different states, children with different needs, adult, minor, incarcerated, addiction, anything that's outside of sort of the, I don't want to say norm, because there really is no norm, but outside of a simple sort of plan, then yes, you probably would benefit from the trust as opposed to it.
Thank you. So that's all I have as far as questions, but I'm gonna put you on the spot. So for those that don't know, I wrote a book called The Ugly Side of Real Estate. It is available on Amazon, and I have a channel just for agents called Nat Knows Real Estate, and I have a podcast called The Ugly Side of Real Estate. So on that, over there, we share all things real estate career related, including the ugly side, because it's not always pretty, but it can be beautiful. So give me one ugly side of real estate experience.
I mean, in my 20 years, I'm sure I've had, and by the way, get the book if you haven't. I've got the book. My only downside with the book is that I didn't get it signed by Natasha, but that's going to be remedied pretty soon.
Yes, I will sign it.
But it was a great book
Thank you.
to purchase. It's interesting you say that because I just did a talk to other attorneys on common closing pitfalls. The things that we always have to be aware of situations. So a worst case scenario that I had a seller, somebody trying to sell vacant land, and the buyer was buying for cash. And we found out, long story short, that seller wasn't the actual seller of the property. So they fooled the agent. They provided the necessary documents to the agent. They at some point fooled us initially because we really don't do an investigation at first. We just assume a signed contract is done. But as we get closer to the closing, we want to make sure, oh, you're not going to be there? Okay. Oh, well, we need to make sure your identity. So if we offer the mail away because and one of the parts about the mail away is that it's a third party notary. So no, we're not going to accept you to get your own notary to do it. We have to contract with a third party service to have that notary or that attorney go to your house to properly identify you and make sure. So in this situation, the seller or the alleged seller gave power of attorney to the agent because they know it's less. Okay, great. Power of attorney to the agent. Agent came to the closing. Where's the original document? Because we need the original document. Oh, I'm sorry, I never sent it. Okay, well, go ahead and overnight it to us. But send us a copy in the meanwhile, just to make sure. They sent us a copy, highlighted, bold. You can tell it's fake. We never get the original in to record. The copy that the one that we got in to record was the color copy of the fake power of attorney. And so again, we rescinded the contract. We told the buyer, sorry, I know you sent us funds. We sent it back, but we just can't conclude this transaction. So that's the situation. That's why we are sort of paranoid and in my case, OCD anal, is because I want to make sure, my license is the most important thing in my practice. And so I want to make sure that I have no claims 5, 10, 15 years from now, 20 years when I'm no longer practicing, that there are no claims. So every transaction is looked at with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that at the end of the day, we are transferring property from the rightful owner to the rightful buyer.
Right. And on the other side of that, that's why they check for liens, why you check for liens Correct. Before somebody closes on to make sure that the property is free and clear, right?
Georgia is what's called a first to file state. So Georgia, if you file it first, you have priority over subsequent liens. So our job representing the buyer's lender is that when we file their lien, the security deed, it has priority over others. So that's why we take off liens. So if there's HOA liens, payoffs, anything previous to that, we get those things paid off so that when we file the security deed, it has priority over every subsequent lien that's filed there. So it's just a matter of making sure that we do all of those things. And it's a team effort. And I think people sometimes lose track of that. We closing attorneys don't get paid if the file doesn't get closed. And I always have to remind people about that. There's no magic bullet. I'm not trying to stop this transaction. I'm just trying to make sure that it's done properly. So there's no issue.
Makes sense. Yeah, we are a team. I tell anybody I speak with, we are working as a team between myself, the lenders, and the closing attorneys.
We're an extension of you as real estate agents, because if you've done a great job representing your client up until the point, and we do a horrible job at a closing, at the end of the day, the client is not necessarily going to remember the great parts. They're just going to remember, oh, that closing attorney was proper. So we don't take that for granted. We know we're an extension of everybody. And so we try to make sure that lasting impression that we give is one that says, hey, this entire closing from start to finish was wonderful. And I think that's what we pride ourselves on.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. If anyone has questions about estate planning, wills, trust, anything in between, you're looking, you would like to be your closing attorney, all of his information will be down below. Please schedule with him. As you can see, he is very, very knowledgeable, extremely knowledgeable. And I appreciate you so much for sharing all that you shared today, more than I could have asked for. So thank you.
As I said, we appreciate you very much, Natasha. And the good thing, if you hadn't brought up that when you were a client, I would have never mentioned it. But I do appreciate you being a client, appreciate real estate transactions as well. So that's important. It's just making sure, again, that we do the product that we say we're going to be able to do.
Wonderful. And just FYI, not all real estate closing attorneys are estate planning attorneys, right? This is area of expertise. Great. So again, please check the description box. Be sure to subscribe to Thua's YouTube channel. Watch those videos that I mentioned on my end. If you're not already following my podcast, please go ahead and check that out. It is Real Estate Ready with SoulByNet.com. So if you're not able to make a video, you can listen via podcast, and go ahead and grab the book. For the month of May, by the time you see this video, it probably won't be May, but for the month of May, 50% of all proceeds from the book are going to NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness. So I always want to give back, look to give back in a variety of ways. And I heard you mention as well, when people come for in-office meetings, they bring canned goods. So I love that. I love that. We got to pay it forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So we are going to, wait, no, before we do, I'm just going to shout out to you and your team. Extremely professional, organized, like reminders, like they are on top of it. I know you are in good hands. If I'm mentioning anybody on this channel, it's because you're going to be in good hands. So thank you, Thua. And I am going to sign off here. Before I do, please go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. If you learned something like this video, it is free and it helps me. All right. Have a positive, peaceful, and productive day. Bye.